Welcome to the Mari 2.6 WebEx launch. Thanks for joining us here on Friday afternoon in London, or Friday morning in California, or Friday sometime wherever you guys are. Hey, hello from Portugal. So what we're going to do is I'll give you guys a quick run through of some of the cool new features in Mari 2.6. And then I will hand you over to the capable hands of our superstar demo guy, Deke, who has been burning the midnight oil and being a complete hero to get all of this stuff ready for you guys. So without further ado, let's get on with the presentation. So Mari 2.6 is something that we've been really working on in bits and bobs now for about 18 months. And it's a culmination of a lot of work that we've been doing with a whole bunch of our customers about how we can update Mari's lighting and shading and look development workflows to make it more applicable, not just to VFX. All of this stuff is, super useful for VFX, but also what we can do to make Mari more useful for things like next generation games and people working on sort of high-end, cutting-edge real-time graphics. So we've got a whole bunch of things in there that we actually developed in association with our games customers. And things like layered materials, physically based shading, are really directly from the work that's being done on the current generation of games engines. So Deke will take you through a whole bunch of really cool stuff that we've put in there. And I'll just give you a really quick overview. So the first thing we put in is environment lighting. And this is it's a fairly common technique, but it's incredibly powerful to allow you to see your textures under captured HDR lighting environments. And we ship with a whole bunch of pre-made, really high-quality HDRs, which were given to us courtesy of Scott Metzger. So thank you, Scott, if you're out there. But you can also put your own environment lights in there as well as DDS cube maps, EXRs, or floating point tips. Combined with that, is the audio working? So it's had a question. Can anybody hear me? Yeah, audio's fine. Awesome. So the next thing that we looked at was how to improve the layered material workflow. So often, you don't have a single material over the whole surface of an object. You've got different materials, so you've got paint, and you've got wood, and you've got metal, and you've got grime, and these are kind of layered and stacked up on top of each other. And before Mari 2.6, setting up that sort of workflow was really quite difficult. But 2.6 has that in there as a custom function, as a core function, and this really maps onto the way that we see things like Unity and Unreal and the new Crytek engines going. So you can paint different materials and then reveal between those materials with masks. And if anybody's been following anything in offline or real-time rendering for the last few years, physically based shading is a key feature. So previous to 2.5, we shipped with some old-school, non-energy preserving Phong and Beckman and Blinn materials. In Mari 2.6, we now have our energy-preserving Brdf material type, which is cutting-edge, great physically plausible material, and that can work with the layer system as well. So you can have multiple layers of physically based materials on top of each other, so metal and wood and paint, etc. And one of the key things that always happens during any texturing workflow is you get the model and you get some UVs and you paint on it, you get all your textures looking perfect, and then somebody comes along and changes the UVs underneath you. Before Mari 2.6, this was a bit of a problem. You either had to repaint or use another solution to transfer those textures from your existing UVs over to the new set. Mari 2.6 built this in perfectly. You can transfer your entire layer stack, all of the adjustments, all the groups, all the masks, and that comes over automatically. And this works between UV and UV, or UV and Ptex, or Ptex and UV. So you can start painting in Ptex and then transfer it to UVs when they're ready. So really you've got freedom to change a model as you like. And the last big key feature is Alembic support. And Alembic is a new industry standard visual effects point cache-based geometry format. And this is really standard now in all of the Foundry products. Modo, Katana, Nuke, all support Alembic as a way of transferring geometry and cameras forwards and backwards. Mari's now caught up with the rest of the guys, and you can now import animated Alembic files, animated geometry, cameras, and hierarchies. And so your workflow between Mari and Nuke, or Mari and Modo, should now be much smoother and simpler. And I'm really pleased to announce that Mari 2.6 is available now for download on our website with a 15-day trial and a whole bunch of videos and loads of cool stuff. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand you over to Deke, who will take you through some of the really cool functionality and actually show you some pretty pictures. Hi everybody, if you hold on with us for 1 second, Deke's just having a little problem dialing in. Can you guys hear me? And what I can do is tell you guys about some of the extensibility that Mari has regarding the Brdfs. So with 2.6, we've actually made it incredibly easy to add custom shaders into Mari that work with the layering system. So if you head on over to paintmore.co.uk, which is our web forum, there's a bunch of people doing some really great work of converting Arnold and V-Ray shaders over to Mari custom shaders, and hopefully they should be made available soon. So hopefully we should get Deke on in just a minute. So are there any other questions? So at the moment there's a question here, will we provide any material presets? At the moment Mari 2.6 doesn't have that, but going forwards we think it's certainly a great idea, you know, having the ability to drop in a velvet or a brushed metal or a brass, rather than having to manually tweak everything yourself. Certainly possible via the Python API. We just didn't quite get round to it for this particular release. Texture transfer is relatively independent of the amount of RAM that you have. So we've actually transferred hundreds of gigs of textures on a 12 gig system. So there is some memory requirement, but it's not strictly limited to the amount of RAM that you have. Question here about Open Subdiv. Watch this space. We've got some exciting news about that. Hopefully coming up later in the year. At the moment, the Brdf that we are using isn't matched directly against any of the game engine, the Unreal or Crytek systems, but hopefully as we go forward, we'll be able to use the extensibility built into it to get shaders in there that match more closely your target renderer, be it Unreal or RenderMan or Arnold or V-Ray or whatever. Yeah, so there's a question here about Ptex. So you can now transfer seamlessly between Ptex and UV layouts. So you can start working on Ptex months before your UV layout is decided. If you want to work exclusively in Ptex and then only transfer over to UV right at the last moment, you can do that. So previously this was a bit of a pain, and you were either stuck in Ptex or in UV land. Now you can really seamlessly bounce forwards and backwards between any of them. So the workflow that we've seen with game engines, and this has actually been done by a whole bunch of very large games companies that you guys will have heard of, is to take their in-game shaders and put them directly into Mari. So their artists are working through their in-game shaders in the Mari viewport. so they get pixel for pixel what they're going to see in their game engine when they eventually do export and flatten all of the layers down. And we actually had a really nice experience with a large game studio in Santa Monica a few weeks ago, where we went in on the Monday, we did a demo. On Tuesday morning, they had their in-game shaders running inside of Mari, and on Wednesday, we started talking about them getting buying some licenses. So the process of doing that is actually incredibly quick, and being able to save an export flatten step and be able to use your in-game shaders is incredibly valuable, especially when you start getting into physically plausible layered materials. And it's incredibly difficult to work out exactly what a 0.2 grade spec map is going to do when it's under neon lighting. Hi, do we have Deep there?
Yes.
Woohoo! Hello, Deep.
I'm in.
I'm going to hand over to you.
So I'm just going to kind of walk you guys through some of the basics inside of, some of the new features that we have coming up that Jack briefly mentioned. I'll just kind of show you guys in person inside of Mari. So the big one, the first one that Jack mentioned was the environment light. That's a big thing. So if you go and bring up the lights palette, so you can just right-click on the top bar, go down, bring up lights, you'll see this new light pop up called environment. So I can actually go ahead and turn off all my lights. I don't have to have any lights in here. And then it'll just revert to essentially a flat shader. And then I go and turn on the environment light. And if I have an image in here, it will pop in here. And I can go in and I can turn up the intensity. I can go through and look through all the different HDRs. So I can kind of pop this up. Good. I can go through any of these and go through and adjust the intensity on these guys. But the other cool thing is if I want, I can also turn on things like animation. So I can go in here, I can turn on animation, have it rotating around. But one thing you'll see right here is that there isn't actually anything, you don't really see a lot of affecting the surface. So one thing I have to do is I have to switch to a Brdf shader for this guy. So let me go back to static. You go to my shaders. And I'll switch to my Brdf shader. So this is also a new feature in here. Actually, if you go and look right here, we have a few new shaders. A lot of these are examples, but the Brdf is the new physically correct shader that's inside of Mari. So I go in, then I go to my lights, and now if I go and turn up my, if I were to turn up my intensity, or turn on the rotate, you should see more of an effect on the surface. But another thing that you will also need to do is, because these are, a lot of the environment shaders, the environment lights, are all in linear light space. So another thing I'll need to do is I'll need to actually convert this model to linear. So this is a common thing that most video games, but also most rendering engines, a lot of people, working in a linear light workflow. So what you want to do is you want to go in and go to my channels and bring up my layers. So I've got my layers here, and you'll see I just have my flattened version, my diffuse. One thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to convert this to linear light space. So if I go into my adjustment layers, there is an adjustment layer called sRGB to linear. So usually what you want to do is you want to have that at the very top. So I'll put that at the top of my stack. And then I'll go to my input color space, and you'll see this. I have a little bar here, and it looks very much like inside a Nuke, if you're familiar with Nuke. So what I can do is I want to go and say my input color space is linear. I'll convert it to linear. And then I want to make sure my viewer transform is set to sRGB. So that means my textures I can continue to paint in sRGB, but I am doing my, all my lighting and shading is being done in linear, and then I'm actually converting in the viewer back to the viewer light, essentially the color space of my monitor. So I'm converting to sRGB here. So now you'll see when I'm actually going in and adjusting things, things look kind of things look much nicer in here, in the viewer. They look more, they're kind of reacting a little more like they would in real life. So I can go back in, turn on rotate. I can kind of cycle through all my different HDRs. So some of these may or may not actually fit. So that's kind of cool. And I'll go back and turn this guy off, turn off. And let me go back to the, there we go, the outdoor stand one. That one's kind of a nice one for this guy. So another thing we have in here inside the shaders is we have a new shader called a layered shader. So this is a big thing that a lot of the new game engines are starting to do. You guys have been doing stuff inside of 3D for a long time. 3D, we've had layered shaders for actually a very long time. But video games, this is video game engines, this is a very new thing. So inside of Mari, we now have it so I can go in and I can go and add a layered shader. So I go layered. And then when I do that, it will actually ask me what resolution I want to make the max. So I'm going to go and I'll just leave it at a 1K matte. And now you'll see layered and it'll pop up blank. And then I'll go to the, I'll have a new little tab pop up here called the shader layers. So I can go in, I can add a Brdf. Bring this guy up here. And I'll go and pick my diffuse channel. And there we go. And I'll pick my glossiness. I'll go and pick a couple shaded, different channels I need to have in here. Specular and my normal map. So I might have this as my, this will be my base shader for my body. But then let's say I want, for example, the texture on the cloth up top or the legs at the bottom as a different one. So what I'm going to do is I just go and add a second Brdf. And I'll just go, just for this sake of organization, I'll just go in and I can just name these guys. So I can go in and name this bottom one, name this one my body. And I'll name this one my legs. And I can go in and hook these guys up. Hook up my normal map here in a second. And then after I go through and set these guys up, then I can actually create the masks to go between these. So this becomes, inside here, I can actually create a layer just like I created in my actual, my normal texture layers. So I just go in and I just have a layer option right here. I can just go in, say make a mask. I can add a mask to that guy. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to select the body. So I can select the body and make a mask. So I can essentially punch a hole through the body. So I'm just going to go in, go to the top. And I can do patches, fill with white. Oops, wrong one, patches. Go with black. Oops, I'll select this guy again. So now I can essentially adjust these two separate layers completely separate of each other. And you essentially have a mask that's modifying the two. Actually, I did it backwards, but, oh, no, I'm sorry, I did it right. So yeah, you'll see here, I can have a completely separate shader for the legs from the body, and I can continue to build up kind of my shader stack in here. and do all my look dev for, you know, what I would actually see inside of my my game engine inside of Mari. So another really cool thing that we have inside of Mari 2.6 is Alembic Support, and this is a big one that a lot of people have been asking for a while. So Mari, originally we supported OBJ files, and OBJ files are very universal. Everyone uses them. But if you're doing very, very large pieces of geometry, oops, actually I already have this open. So if you're doing very large pieces of geometry, those OBJ files can get quite large. And if you want to bring in animation into Mari, you have to actually write out an OBJ sequence. So now what we have it, so you can do is I can go in and I can just add a version for this guy, for this walker. And I'll go in, bring in the walker animation, the body. And then you'll see, and very much like you see in a lot of applications when you have Alembic support, you'll get a list of all the different objects inside of the Alembic archive. So I have an option in here. I can either merge these. I can bring in individual pieces. I could pick, I could say, only bring in the body. I can pick my frame ranges I want to bring in. I can do frame offset. I can pick to make a single mesh, or merge the nodes. You have different options for that. So I can go in and pick different pieces of geo. So I can go in. So now I have the animated geometry that I brought in. If I go down to my plate controls, I can actually see any kind of animation that I have on this. And so you can do that with Alembic. And the other big one, so I'll just show you guys one last thing. The last one is a texture transfer. So if I go in, I'm going to go to my projects here. And I have this ship model here. And what I can do is I can, let's say, this commonly happens to people is you've done a lot of work on the model, you've done all this painting work, and then the modeler, whoever's doing the modeling will change the model, and then they'll also change all the UVs. They'll move stuff around, and it requires you as a texture painter to do a lot of extra work. So what we have now is I can go in and I can just add a new version of the another model. So I can go in, I can say add object. I can go in, add a new piece of geometry. And now you'll see two of these guys. And now what I want to do is I want to actually transfer between these two. So if you go to the UV tab, you'll see, you can see the two different UV layouts. So I have, here's my one UV layout that's just from 0 to 1. And then my other one that's all painted is, has 4 UDEMs. So what I can do is I can go in here and I can select on my layers. So I go in here, I right click, and there's an option now in here called transfer. So in the transfer options here, I can pick which model I want to transfer from and to. I go in, I'm going to pick my second model for my 2. And then I can go here and I can pick my layers. I can decide which ones I want to actually do the transfer from. So I'm going to transfer both of these guys. This is obviously a very simple kind of setup, but it's a demo, so I don't think you guys want to wait 5 minutes while I do a transfer of a whole big giant layer stack. So the nice thing is this actually does it pretty fast. Those are 4 4K maps that I'm going to transfer. I'm transferring it to a single one. And Mari's baking a point cloud and then transferring to the new piece of geo. And in about 20 or 30 seconds, we should have a finished version. So it does actually a pretty good job. Go in, just go and turn everything off. So you'll see between those two, it actually did a decent job transferring. So if I go look at my UVs, it transferred all the UVs from that to this single UDEM. Which is pretty good. So another thing you can do is you're not limited to a single layer. So I only transferred the sRGB to linear and the one texture layer, but you do have the option to go in and transfer a whole layer stack. So for example, so that's my simplified one. I'm not going to actually do this, but if I go in and do transfer, I could potentially go and pick all these layers and transfer it over, and it will do each individual layer, not just the individual, not just the flattened layer. It'll do all of them, which is really nice. And with this model, I've done it on my laptop, and it does it in 5 minutes, which is pretty good for a laptop. On a desktop, I'm sure it would go much faster. There's also additional options in here. So we do have an advanced option. So you can actually transfer things like animation from, animated textures. You have just more controls over like interpolation. You can tell it to flatten the textures if you want. You could tell it to bleed edges. You can pick the range and distance. And also you can pick the fill color. So for example, let's say you modified the model, you changed it. When you transfer it from one model to the other, you could tell it to fill the pixels, which it doesn't, some pixels that if you add horns to a character or something, you can pick how far away you want the transfer to be from. So that's pretty much all I've got that I've time to show you guys. I think it's on to questions now.
Yeah, this is Shane. Is Jack back online in London?
Hey, yeah, I'm here. So I'm more than happy to go through any questions. One of the questions was about matching geometry for texture transfer. So there doesn't really need to be any correspondence between the source and destination geometries in terms of poly count, face type. You can go from quads to tris, tris to quads, quads to n-gons. You can double the face count, you can halve the face count. If you had a character and you put some horns on it, for example, you might not get any texture transferred to the new geometry, but the rest of it will transfer fine. It's really robust in that way. The questions about Arnold, M2A, V-Ray, that sort of thing. At the moment, the work for that is actually being done by a group of Mari users on the Paintmore forum. We'll have a look at how we could possibly include that as stock in a standard version of Mari in the future. But at the moment, if you go to those forums, we've got people working on it at the moment, and hopefully they'll be available for download, so your Mari viewport will match your Arnold or V-Ray viewport exactly.
Yeah, I believe there was a similar question about matching.
Move objects around in the viewport. If you pick up the Move tool, which is the little cross icon on the left-hand side, you can pick objects and just move them around. Regarding, is there any loss of detail in the transfer process, it really depends on the size of your UVs or Ptex faces in the source and the destination object. So in the example that Deep used, he went from 4K textures to one 1K texture, I think. And
1 4K.
In that case, he went down to something like 1/32nd of the number of pixels. So in that case, there will be resolution loss, but we don't see artifacting. So if you were to transfer from one 4K patch to another 4K patch, we don't necessarily see degradation. But if you go from a 4K patch to a 256 pixel patch, obviously you've got, you know, a lot less pixels to view. Are your shader outputs dependent on your shader? So you can export as many outputs from Mari as you like. We're not limited to the number of, you know, inputs that your shader has. So if your shader has 32 different inputs with, you know, 4 types of hair and dirt, dust, scratches, whatever, then you can create those and export them directly in Mari. So, you know, you're not limited that way. At the moment, Mari only supports a single UV set per object. So there's a question here about controlling the camera. If you are on Linux, one thing to check is that some Linux installs automatically map the Alt key to moving your window around. So if you go and check in your window manager and make sure that that's not set to move your window around, then you might find it easier to use. Secondly, if you find it a bit alien from Maya, for example, if you go to Edit, Preferences, Navigation, you can then set the navigation style to match Maya exactly. The question here, can you transfer from Ptex onto multiple UDIMs? Absolutely. So I can go from a single Ptex mesh onto 20 UDIMs without any problem, and the reverse as well. So I can go from 20 UDIMs onto a single Ptex. Is HDR lighting inside of Mari CPU, GPU intensive? It does take up some CPU time, but we don't see a significant frames per second drop. So it doesn't go from like 60 frames a second to 3 frames a second. It maybe goes from 60 to 59, 58. So not massively heavy. Any more questions coming from? Okay. Any more questions, guys? Oh, any more tools related to tiling textures? So in the layer stack, we have a tiling texture procedural, which allows you to tile up textures easily, just like you would a layer inside of Photoshop. You've got controls in there for U repeat, V repeat, rotation, and a bunch of other stuff. So you can actually use them via using the tiling procedural layer. Auto-aligning images with imported camera resolution gate. If you import a FBX as a projector and then set the image on the projector to be the image you want to align, then that should be aligned correctly. So we've got lots of questions coming in, so I may take a minute to catch up. Any new grading adjustment layer features in 2.6? Oh, you've got me there. I think we snuck a couple in there. I can't remember off the top of my head. I am really sorry.
It's like I think there's a new normals one. There's a.
So the presenting machine is a 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro. So it's running on a laptop. I demo regularly with huge assets on a 16 gig Retina MacBook Pro. The question, you said transfer any amount of UDIM. So you can go from Ptex to UV, UV to Ptex, or UV to UV. So you can either work with UVs or without UVs, or go from a version of the model that has UVs to a version of the model that doesn't, or vice versa. So really, you can go any way that you want. Is there a way to do a select a color range and do a quick fill like you did with the panel in the demo? I now need to remember what we've shipped. We do have a select color procedural which allows you to fill. I can't remember whether it's in V1 or V2. Sorry, been really busy. We haven't made any changes in 2.6 to the brush engine, but if you have any issues regarding that, please let us know and we can see what we can do to help. Environment light, yeah, no massive performance drop. I just tend to turn it on and keep it on. Is paint transferred into solid changes, but the shapes are overall very close? Yep. It will actually work if the surfaces are not particularly close. It will go out and find, the nearest paint to that surface. So it does a pretty good job if you've gone from a high poly down to a low poly. 2.6 is a free upgrade for everybody who is current on their maintenance. So if you're current on your maintenance, then you get 2.6 straight out of the box. Question is, how does layered shaders development translate into proper look dev outside of Mari with proper shaders? So, Justin, I mean, if you're talking about VFX style stuff, then pretty much every company I know out there, the say image engine level or Pixar or DreamWorks or whatever else, have their own in-house look dev configuration system. So the layered materials are fully exposed via Python, and we provide examples of how to parse the information off those shaders that could then be potentially rebuilt into a layered Arnold shader or a mental ray shader. So we don't target any particular external look dev environment, but there's a lot of hooks in there to make it really straightforward to do some integration. Can we select move paint in the UV view now? Not in this particular version. Hold on 1 second, please. Yeah, so we don't have any updates to being able to move paint around in the UV view. But if you use the toe brush, you can get a fair amount of the way there. The course of navigation, okay. So at the moment we don't have any way of disabling navigation undos in the viewport. We actually need to always undo navigation because of the way Mari's a projection painting system. And if you're not in exactly the same position when you're undoing back through paint, it doesn't make sense. We could have a look at folding multiple navigation undos into a single one, but we haven't made any updates in this particular version. We can look at sharing this presentation. I don't see any reason why not. I need to work out how we could do that. If you wanted to drop an email to the Foundry, maybe, what email address should they use? Yeah, so if you drop an email to marketing@thefoundry.co.uk, we can provide you a copy of that presentation. Additional features and controls when generating ambient occlusion for geometry. I can't say anything at the moment, but Michael, watch this space. We might have some very exciting stuff coming in an upcoming version. Modo style navigation as a preset in Mari, we will have a look and see what we can do. The limitation of blending groups, pass through. is some code that we are working on at the moment. We don't know which version it will go into, but it's relatively far along, and hopefully it shouldn't be that far away. Transparent instead of hidden, not in this particular version, but again, it's something that we're very interested in looking at. Right. If there aren't any more questions, then I think it's time to wrap this up. Thank you very much for listening in today. We're incredibly sorry about all of the technical problems. Rest assured that we're going to put WebEx into a stack, take it out back, and give it a good kicking after this. Thank you for Deke for doing a great job of demoing and getting all the demo assets prepared. We're more than happy to answer any questions that you guys have offline. So please get in contact via support or the forums or Twitter or whatever you like, and let us know your questions. Otherwise, we love your feedback, so please download 2.6, give it a go. Let us know the good stuff, let us know the bad stuff, and as always, it's all based on your feedback. So thanks a lot, and enjoy painting.